So in this workshop, what I want to do is just showcase the many ways that the RSD has been adapted, and I know that from what John has said, a lot of people have been doing that already. And I want to look particularly at the course that I'm teaching as an exemplar of how we've tried to implement it across the whole program, so that it's actually something the students recognise in first year and work with. And then looking at perhaps how you might use the RSD for your own assessment and feedback purposes. And what I really want to do is have it in a supportive environment, because working on your own, it's such a challenge, assessment and feedback. I think we're all plagued by it, and it does feel like you're climbing that mountain, but I think when we're working with each other in a supportive environment, it does seem to make it a bit easier. So it's all about sharing and collaborating, and hopefully with some future working relationships, because coming from a dental discipline, most of my collaboration is done across other disciplines, because it's the shared passion for learning and teaching. We're focusing on assessment, and I know that there's some sort of terminology like assessment for, as and of learning, and I guess that in terms of that premiership table, for want of a better word, you know, we sort of think of assessment of learning as being superseded by initially assessment as learning and assessment for learning, and we're trying to align our assessment practices with those higher level ones. And I suppose that feedback's the other really thorny issue, and I came across this fantastic website from the UK about the kind of feedback we give, and I guess that I love that word ipsactive. It's my new word for the week, and it kind of means looking at where someone has come in a certain period of time and reflecting on their progress. So in my workshop we'll be looking at those kind of feedback approaches, and perhaps how the RSD can help us work with students to align that. Work by Sally Kift and Karen Moody here in Australia talks about strategies which really do foster learning success, engagement and retention, and I think the RSD in the context that I'm talking about really does help to meet a lot of these sort of strategies, you know, articulating expectations, scaffolding assessment, helping students make the whole of program approach. So just in our own area in oral health, sort of it's a way of being able to, I guess, benchmark, being helped to align against the RSD's levels of student autonomy, as you can see there, but also the facets of inquiry. So it's both an X and a Y exercise in trying to adapt it. And it's always something that has been useful in kind of helping my thought processes when I'm planning my assessment. So as John mentioned, scaffolding is probably a really important thing, I think, as students come into a course, using it as a way of raising the bar almost and making it explicit. And so we'll be looking at the importance of that in especially a program-wide approach, where you may start at quite low levels of autonomy, but then the students can see it ramp up as they progressively go through that. And I think that's a really important component in assessment as learning. So our whole of program approach, we're going to be just looking at some examples of, in first year, you can see up there the Ray family case study, where that's something the students actually analyse a case study in an authentic kind of context in how they'll use it, and how we've designed the assessment rubric using the RSD. In first year, in second year, we've adapted it in more of a clinical applied way, so it's not just in a written piece of work, it can be actually in a whole type of assessment approach that can go right through to a capstone. And I came across this really nice picture, and I think it really does summarise assessment, because usually students think of it as being very scary, but it actually comes from a word meaning to sit beside. And I think that that's what we need to probably even let our students know. It's about walking with them. And I think that the implementation of something like the RSD does help to really make that a little bit more straightforward for us. Thank you. You have to, I suppose, encourage people to try it. People often don't like moving outside of their comfort zone. We were very fortunate that our course already had a capstone experience in third year, so that was kind of an obvious point at which we can kind of look at to build towards. And we've been very fortunate that as part of our work with John in the RSD that we've been interviewing our graduates. And I think over some 8 or 9 interviews now, a lot of our graduates of 2, 3, 4 years out of uni tell us that that experience of that scaffolded approach, a bit like John mentioned or someone mentioned at the time, students often don't see the value of it when they're in first year or even second year. It's when they get to third year and then beyond, they can actually look back and see that was a really important part of my development as an academic and a citizen, really, in terms of that scaffolded approach. But it's not easy, and you do, I suppose, have to, and it's not in every subject in every part of the program, but it's across the program in all years.